You're listening to the iRacers Lounge podcast, where we discuss everything iRacing in a casual setting. Enjoy. Where we talk all things iRacing in a casual setting. Joining me are the usual characters, Brian McCubbin.
Hey guys, how's it going? Happy Daytona week.
All right, we're in season. David Hall.
For sure. Happy Speed Weeks. Or week.
Greg Hectus.
Let's go racing.
Let's go racing, boys. And special guest returning, Evan Pasoko.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back for another year.
Well, boy, I can't believe it. Is it the 13th season now?
I know our little series is a teenager now. It's kind of funny, how old the series was. I know just a couple years ago talking about, it being a 10-year anniversary, and we're on 13 years running strong way back to 2010, and hasn't felt like 13 years. I know this is my 7th year, I think, being involved with the series, and kind of still sounds more realistically like 3. So time flies, I guess, when you're having fun.
Well, congrats on that. Well, this Coke series is back, as you heard, at Daytona this week, and we're excited to have Evan Pasoko back to cover that exciting action for another season. We have another big Daytona iRacing event that didn't go off quite as well. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, guys, and you can follow all these great stories on iRacersLounge.com and selecting show notes. So all this stuff will be compiled for you together. You can go through it. We have archive notes from the past shows. If you missed something and you want to check out a topic or a piece of hardware that we covered, go to iRacersLounge.com and select show notes, and you can see it all.
Want to swap to hydraulic pedals, but you're worried about leaks? We want to take a moment to tell you about Sim Coach's P1 Pro pedals. Their proprietary no-leak technology ensures all fluids stay inside where they belong. They completely redesigned the hydraulic cylinders found on typical pedals and made them spec for sim racing. Designed, machined, and assembled right here in the USA, you can have confidence what you'll get is quality. Backed by their lifetime warranty, there's no reason not to give them a look. Head over to simcoaches.com and use iRacers Lounge at checkout to save 10% off your total order. Go do it now. These guys are in Vegas. Evan, you should go check them out. Let's talk a Coke race. Before the race, we got to hear from Ben Kennedy, Alan Cavana on pit road. That was kind of a neat touch. Of course, in the booth, you and Blake, and Pike, I think was there as well, and then new sponsors, Placey and Wendy's, joined the existing lineup.
Yeah, it's always fun to bring some new partners into the fold, and you got Wendy's, was in chat with us on Twitch, which a lot of people in chat and in the community were having some fun with. It's also cool to see them on Brian's car as well. So super cool that there's more people wanting to get involved in this series. And I mean, we have a kind of a whole new look to our broadcast team this year, right? I think I'd be remiss without, saying thank you to Tim Terry for everything he's done for the series over the years. And excited to have Blake in the booth as somebody who, was 1 or 2 bounces away from being in this series. I think he can give us a ton of insights. Obviously, he's a great broadcaster, so I'm looking forward to covering the series alongside him. And, we got a whole new booth team with Camille and Alan, and then, of course, Brandon Cantell returning as a driver analyst, James Pike on pit road. So I think we got a really talented group to cover the year for us.
Yeah, and neat to hear from Ben Kennedy and what he thought about the experiment of the LA Coliseum and the successes and how iRacing, made it very possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if everybody's aware of, how deep that went, and the fact that, when NASCAR wanted to explore the idea deeper as far as, what's the track going to look like? What are the dimensions, the banks, the curves, all that kind of stuff going to look like? iRacing built that out for them. And a select handful of the veteran Coke Series drivers were actually ones who tested on beta versions of, a handful of different layouts of that track to test it. So it certainly went super deep, and it was a really cool experience for the Coke drivers to be involved. But I think just again, another really cool sign, much like how iRacing has been working with NASCAR and Auto Club Speedway to model their potential short track redesign. Just another cool way to see how iRacing is getting involved.
All right, and on to the race. It was a clean start. Around lap 4, there was about a 10-car pack, a second behind the lead pack, although it seemed like they were closing in. And then it was trouble on lap 6. Contact between LaPrade and Bowden sent the 69 into his teammate. That collected about 7-8 cars. There were a lot of big names that were hurt very early on in the going of this event.
I mean, it's just, too early. And I don't really think it was necessarily guys driving over their heads, right? You just, you get that first group that drops back a little bit. People are kind of scrambling to reestablish position. I think we all knew coming into this race that these next gen cars have a really competitive draft package. You're able to make lanes work. You're able to get runs. You're able to control that pocket of air to stay in position if you want. When you give these drivers these tools, yeah, they can sit in line and hang out, or they can, push the issue a little bit. And I don't really think anybody was driving totally egregious, but you just get a couple of people out of sync with some of those lanes. You end up 3 wide off and into the corner. And, as you mentioned, just like that, a lot of big names are done no more than 10 laps into the season opener, which obviously is not what they were hoping for.
Yep, and then after that, not much happening. The field was 2x2. Both Ottinger and Conti continued to swap that lead back and forth. Most of the aggression was in the back currently. Around lap 25 of the 80, trouble for Kyle Peddle. He lost it actually all on his own. It looked like he was trying to cut quick to the bottom, and it just went around. It was a hard lick, but no caution. That's tough.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that on iRacing Speed Week, right? Is cars getting loose on their own. Really mostly not actually coming down the bank on the exit of the corner as much. And Kyle was pretty much there, but actually just kind of closer to the exit of the corner. If you're trying to turn down from that top lane to the bottom and you're giving it, a lot of wheel there's a checkup in front you're trying to avoid, or you're trying to slide down into a very small opening. If you give that a lot of wheel input, your car's braking sideways, right? I mean, there was really nothing notably that Kyle could have done better there. Just gave it a little bit too much wheel, spun it out. He, I think, was pretty content with just staying up top. A lot of drivers were really pedaling the throttle, no pun intended, because the cars were a little bit loose. They were a little bit unstable. And I saw this actually carry over into the next day when I covered last night's top split of the iRacing Daytona 500. We had at least 4 or 5 cars in that race also self-spin. Fortunately, in this case, for the Coke Series race, it's only Kyle involved. I know that is not much, consolation for him, a guy who stepped away from sim racing, who's come back, who I'm sure had a lot of high expectations for his Coke Series debut. But it was just him as he ends up into the fence, and it means no caution, but, essentially takes him out of contention.
Yep, and then lap 40, green flag pit stops are underway. It was 37 to go. Oh, no, teammates, they wreck for the lead. It was contact between Clampett and Ottinger, sent Clampett's number 97 around. Keegan Leahy was also involved.
Yeah, it's a tough break. Listen, that's the last thing you want, right? It's the golden rule in motorsports is to don't take out your teammate. And, I don't think it was either of them being overly aggressive. I just think, when you got a slow lap car there on the bottom, and you're going to go high to avoid them, I just don't think it takes a ton to just feather out of the gas, right? I mean, I've heard from a lot of drivers who saying, like, we can be really aggressive and push in these things a lot more than what we could in the Gen 6 cars. So we saw a lot of people pushing like that, going into a corner, coming out of a corner, changing lanes in the corner and getting away with it. Still not comfortable seeing it happen. And it's just a super tough break that they get a slight touch. The bumpers don't line up when they're transitioning back down to the bottom. Those are your teammates. I mean, it's like I said, very similar to the first incident. I don't really think that there's a ton of blame that you can say this guy, drove over his head or vice versa, but just something that could have easily been avoided, but these guys didn't want to give up that little bit just to lift to be super safe. And obviously gets a couple of drivers collected, and then kind of changes the complexion of the race because these are much shorter races this year in 2022. So only an 80 lap race at Daytona at that point is good on fuel to the end of the race.
Yeah, now this next one, we saw this a lot last night too in the 500. There's really two lanes, and if you get to the middle, you're in no man's land and you're going backwards. And so the only way to really make moves is to go from either the bottom to the top or the top to the bottom when there's a hole. Well, so what happened here was Casey Kerwin, he was trying to make one of those moves and so he came from the top to the bottom, but he wasn't quite clear. And Bobby Zielinski wasn't having any of it, and he basically turned himself off his bumper. No one else involved on that one.
I'll tell you what, Bobby Zielinski is pretty well known that if you're going to clear yourself on his nose, he is not going to cut you a break. And, we saw a couple of people give breaks in the opening 20 laps of the race where they could have delivered that message if they wanted to. But like I said, shorter race, we're past halfway at this point. You're going to kind of have to stand up for yourself. And, Bobby's shown us time and time again, if you're going to try to spin yourself over his nose, he'll let you. I mean, he is not going to go out of his way to babysit you.
All right. Then we had a caution 22 to go as Derek Justice spins on the backstretch. Another at caution 7 to go. Nick Ottinger is among those involved. He spins trying to avoid Ray Alfala. Brian Mercurio is involved. And it looks like we're going to end up with a late race restart at the Daytona.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Ottinger's incident, very similar to what we saw to Kyle Pettel. Ray Alfala's slow. He's in that middle lane that you mentioned, doesn't work well, and he jumps up into an opening on the outside, and instead of just rolling out of the throttle, Nick tries to pull down in the middle lane to try to get something out of it, right? If he can successfully get to the middle, even though it's not a great lane, Ray is so slow up top, he'll at least be able to get in front of him and jump back up, but he gives it that little bit too much wheel input, car breaks sideways. Nothing that Brian Mercurio can do. He's just riding on the bottom and gets absolutely T-boned and is involved in that incident. And seemingly, as it always happens, you get your late race restart at Daytona, setting us up for a wild finish.
Yeah, 3 to go. Malik Ray, Femi Olat, they were leading the field. Steven Wilson was right there. And then it was trouble. Malik Ray, he gets turned on the 2 to go. And so we end up in overtime. And I mean, tough break for him. I mean, he barely squeaks in to the Coke Series again, and he's known for the super speedway, prowess and doing well here. And here he is, on the verge of his first win, and he can just taste it, and he gets turned while leading,
Yeah, I mean, you're not kidding by, barely squeaking in. He was tied for that last spot to come out of the Contender Series, and, had some internal questions on if he'd come and compete this 2022 season. Gets out there, has a good run, stays pretty quiet for most of it. And after the incident, obviously we have the onboard shots, and he was just sitting there in disbelief. I mean, there's so many guys who I can rattle off that if they don't have if they don't have any luck, it's just all bad luck. I mean, and Malik's a guy like that who, I think realizes based on how he's had to go through that requalification process that he's going to have to work really hard to be a top 20 car in this series to lock himself in for 2023. Is a bad, result in Daytona at the end of the road? No. I mean, you got a long way to go, 18 races total, right? 13 more in the regular season. You got ample opportunity. But for a guy like Malik, starting from this far behind is going to be tough. And he's somebody as well who I think can get shaken a little bit by that confidence. If Malik Ray is winning races, he's untouchable, right? Because I think he feeds off that energy. And I think this slow start's probably going to hurt him for a few weeks.
Yep. So down to this final restart, and, they're lined up with Garrett Maines in second behind him. They're coming down to the end here. Garrett is trying to win the race. He eventually pulls out, when he can see the checker to the outside lane. But Steven Wilson is right there on the bottom behind. He wants his win too, and so he's trying to figure, well, how can I get through here? I mean, if it was Talladega, he could make another lane, but it's pretty narrow through here. So he bumps Femi just a little bit because he doesn't know where to go, and he's got a head of steam. He eventually goes below the yellow to try to make it 3 wide and try to go for the win. And they end up with a photo finish 3 wide. The bump that he gave Femi was just enough to edge out Garrett, who was on the top. And Femi Olat wins his first Coke race.
His second straight season in the Coke Series for Femi Olat, and to get his first career win and become the 59th different driver to have a win in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series is big for him. And you're right, it comes down to Wilson. That move to the outside was very well timed. Challenging for the race win there. Garrett Maines had the run. Garrett Maines had a nose in front. And it's just Steven kind of being a little bit indecisive on where he wanted to go, gave a bump first to Femi, then decided to go below the double yellow. Obviously, I think if he ends up winning that race, he doesn't hold it. I think he's able to maintain his third as far as I know, because he didn't gain any positions. He still finishes third in that race. I feel like if Steven Wilson won that on the apron, it probably would not have stood anyways. But that bump to Femi gives him just enough. And, Steven Wilson going down there at least gave us a nice shot of making it a 3 wide finish instead of 2. But, such a great win for Femi Olat to be a winner in the Coke Series, and another great finish at Daytona. Like, I can't be that surprised that we get an exciting finish. There's a lot of questions about these next-gen cars, right? How are they going to race on the short tracks? Obviously, they went through a couple of updates recently to get them up to 2022, Cup Series spec from the next-gen cars that we first got in middle of last year. There's a lot of questions that's going to be answered over the next few weeks and months. But one thing I think we've learned pretty quickly this week on Daytona week is that these things are a blast to drive on the super speedways. And I think that's kind of a lock-in that we're going to have good shows anytime this year.
Yeah, I'm anxious for California, Vegas, whatever's coming up, Phoenix, and just see how these guys do there. I mean, Garrett Maines is hot right now. Obviously Femi and Steven Wilson, continuing what he started last year. So I'm looking forward to seeing some new names up front too. And it's exciting. It was a great race. You had a classic call there, Evan, on the white lap. It's one of those that'll go down for the ages.
It's we get such good stuff out of Daytona. I think it's always such a fun way to kick off the year. Like I said, just super happy to be back for another season. I think we got a great broadcast team that's going to be covering all these races for you. We had an hour-long pre-race that I was just sitting back and watching, right? So I think, everybody really should enjoy our coverage this year and tuning in every Tuesday night. And you're right, there's big questions to be answered. We got Vegas coming up next race in 2 weeks' time. That'll kind of be our intermediate benchmark test. And then I kind of wonder what we're going to get out of Atlanta, right? On to March 15th. Is Atlanta on the calendar because we have a rescan coming? Is it going to be at the old Atlanta? Don't know. I would assume that if it's on the schedule, they have some plan to try to bring us the rescanned version of it. Can't tell you that for certain, just thinking out loud based on precedent. So, there's a couple of questions that are going to be answered. You have your crapshoot races. You got Bristol Dirt in there. We're going back to another super speedway in Talladega later in the year. But, the Gen 6 era took up the majority of the lifespan of this Coke Series. And now this is the third generation of car that's been raced in this championship. And, I think it's going to take a little bit longer than typical to kind of figure out what teams and what technical alliances, what drivers are going to be title contenders. I could typically tell you that after 4 or 5 weeks. Not sure we're going to know by April who's got this thing figured out.
All right, Evan Pasoko. Yeah, what a show with the new car. I think the new horsepower has really rejuvenated a lot of people on how things are going to go this year. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking racing with us.
Anytime, guys. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Well, we have this event. It's the we're going to title it the Podium 500. The prestigious Podium 500 was held this past weekend, and the finish was one with much controversy. Kicked off with Lake Peterson being ruled the winner in the 2022 event. Garrett Maines, however, filed an appeal, and a final decision will be heard in a few hours.
Now, so Lake won the race. There was no question. And we talked about this live in the chat as it happened, and we were talking, is this like protestable in iRacing? Because the question was, did Lake Peterson turn Garrett Maines for the win? Greg, you had some strong opinions about it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, David and I went back and forth in chat there, but I really wasn't sure till I had gone back and seen it a couple times if how did it go? Like I thought it was Peterson that turned it, and then, um, but and then Maines and them were getting together the way that they got at the line there. It just something didn't look right, and we kept going back and forth looking at it because the hardest part too was for the first little bit after um, we had to wait till Twitch updated and they would gone turned off the feed so you could go back and watch it. You couldn't find any videos of it till later on.
Yeah, what we were arguing over was intent. I don't think there's any question that Peterson turned him. They even when well, they'll discuss that a little bit further down the article. But I don't think as quick as it happened that it was in any way intentional, but he did wreck him.
It's Daytona. It's Carb Cup every hour on the hour is what I said. This is NASCAR. This is business as usual.
Well, anytime you're drafting, and a crazy situation like that happens, you're desperate to probably get back in line if you're not going to get the position, right? I think he was trying to get back in line and turn too soon. I've made that same mistake this year in the Winter Series and immediately apologized for it. Took out a guy because it was one of those places where you have to stay up high, and I tried to go low, couldn't make the pass, and the back got a run, and I tried to get in the gap before they got to me, and moved just a little too soon and turned the guy. So I think I believe that's what happened.
I think the other problem is too that these cars punch such a big hole. Even with that wreck going on, they were by themselves. They were gonna get they were able to get back to each other real quickly, and I agree with David now after looking after a time is they are way too close to be making abrupt moves, and if you do make an abrupt move, that's what's going to happen.
Okay, so Lake Peterson won the race. Garrett Maines later said that somebody from Podium told him to file an appeal on the win, and so he did. So they said a final decision will be heard in a few hours. So fast forward, a few hours later, they say the official statement regarding the finish of it, they strip the win from Lake and declare that Garrett Maines is now the winner of the Podium 500. Okay, based on the appeal was granted, apparently. So we went to bed late that night, and Garrett Maines was the winner. And we think we're done, and it's already controversial. A lot of people talking about it on Twitter. Should it be overruled? I mean, like we were just talking, things happen. There was a wreck. They're trying to come to the win. I mean, like I said, this is business as usual to me.
And the kind of the other biggest argument with this call is how many times did they swallow the whistle in incidents like this?
Well, so let's bust it down a little bit more. So, well, let's go into the next part before we do, David. Tell them what happened the next day. We get another surprise.
Yeah, so glancing at the phone between classes at work, I see the post. Podium reverses the decision again, and they essentially basically decided there was no penalty given, and only penalties can be appealed. You can't actually just protest an accident in their rule book. So they basically flip-flopped and gave the win back to Peterson.
Because the officials never penalized Peterson at the end of the race. Therefore, there was nothing to appeal. Great. So they've changed their mind. How many? I've lost count. 3 times now?
Well, it's not even the change in the mind. It's lost integrity through the whole thing of this. There's just it's you got to stick to some gun at some point and know what your rule book is first, right?
Well, I saw on the Twitter someone was saying that Garrett Main, just the lap before the white flag, dumped Rajah Caruth um, fairly blatantly, and nothing was done about that. So why would you penalize this and so forth? So there was a lot of discussion going on.
That goes right back to how many times did they swallow the whistle? But
Yeah, and how do you wait a last lap, to a lap? You said it was just recently after before that. Like, do they weight every lap as the same, or is the last lap weighted a little bit differently? In which it shouldn't be, right? You mean a penalty is a penalty.
So all this discussion and people fleeing the sinking ship. We saw on a Reddit a picture of the Titanic with the podium logo on it as the Titanic going down. I had a neat quote from Jeff McConey, who's from McConey Setup Shop. He's obviously a presence in the community. I'm going to read what he said. He said, quote, "A lack of firm leadership led to the loudest voice dominating the discussion. PR mismanagement is what led to it. Many of us were trying to smooth things over and calm things down to no avail. Race control stood by their call, but were overruled in the end. We will see what happens from here, but many people have already publicly announced their resignation from Podium Esports."
one of those was Terry Radford, and this looks like a gracious letter, but it's basically a resignation with a lot of positive comments to people here and there.
And also none other than James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports, has announced that he is done there.
So obviously, this got very testy within their own organization. Um, both of these resignation letters were done very classy. They didn't call out anybody or anything like that. But there just must have been some serious headbanging going on in there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible? Like, I want